Imagine waking up one day and realizing that the world you've always known suddenly feels shallow, as if the very conversations and routines that once gave you comfort now seem hollow. This is the beginning of the chosen one's journey, the moment when an inner shift occurs and the illusions of society start to fall apart. You begin to notice how much of life is built on appearances, how people cling to identities, opinions, and rituals that give them a sense of belonging but lack true depth. It's unsettling at first because everything around you continues as if nothing has changed. Yet within you, something no longer fits. You can't unsee the falseness once it reveals itself, and so you find yourself standing at a distance, watching the world move by with new eyes. The chosen one is not chosen in the sense of being special or superior. It is not about pride, status, or being marked by destiny. It simply means that you've reached a point where truth begins to matter more than conformity. You no longer find fulfillment in the games people play for approval, success, or control. Instead of being drawn to the noise of constant chatter and distraction, you start yearning for silence, clarity, and authenticity. This shift makes you feel different from those around you, not because you want to be separate, but because their concerns no longer resonate with yours. At first, this can feel like a loss. The conversations that once entertained you now feel repetitive. The gatherings that once excited you now seem empty. Friends may still laugh, gossip, or chase goals that feel meaningless to you. And while you care for them, you cannot force yourself to return to the same illusions. Slowly, you realize that solitude is not something you are choosing. It is something that is happening naturally. The path of awakening draws you inward, away from the surface-level exchanges that once defined your life. And yet, this solitude is not loneliness. It is not isolation born of bitterness or resentment. It is the recognition that in order to remain true to yourself, you must walk a path that few are willing to take. The chosen one walks alone not as punishment, but as necessity. To see what others do not see means to move in ways they cannot understand. And though this journey may feel heavy at first, it carries within it the seed of true freedom, the beginning of a life no longer dictated by illusions, but guided by authenticity. As this inner shift deepens, you start to see patterns that once went unnoticed. The way people cling to roles becomes almost transparent. A colleague who constantly seeks recognition, a friend who always has to prove their worth, a family member who insists you follow traditions without question. All of these behaviors reveal themselves as performances. They are not malicious, and in many ways they are unconscious, yet they are masks that keep people from facing what lies beneath. You begin to notice that much of what passes for connection is in fact an exchange of personas, a delicate dance where everyone plays a part in order to feel safe. Once you see this, it is impossible to fully step back into the play. This realization creates a subtle but powerful distance. It's not that you stop caring for others or lose empathy. On the contrary, you may feel even more compassion for the struggles people endure while trapped in their roles. But you no longer wish to participate in the game. The laughter that hides insecurity, the arguments that cover up fear, the endless search for validation, these no longer call to you. You would rather sit in silence than contribute to noise that leads nowhere. You would rather face your own discomfort than hide behind distractions. In choosing this path, you begin to step further into solitude. At first, this solitude feels like an empty space, almost like something is missing. You may long for the familiar comfort of old conversations, even if they no longer satisfy you. You may reach out, only to find that the distance has already grown, that others cannot understand the changes happening within you. The more you try to explain, the more misunderstood you feel, because awakening is not something that can be shared through words alone. It is a shift in perception, and unless someone has felt it themselves, they will not be able to grasp why you are no longer the same. This misunderstanding often leads to further separation. Friends may think you've grown distant. Family may believe you've become detached. Society may label you as different. What they cannot see is that you are not rejecting them. You are rejecting falseness. And yet, as time passes, the emptiness of solitude begins to transform. You start to realize that being alone is not the same as being lonely. In solitude, you discover space to think, to breathe, to reflect on who you really are without the constant pressure to perform. You learn to sit with your own silence, and slowly, that silence reveals its depth. What once felt like absence begins to feel like presence. You notice the way your thoughts rise and fall like waves, the way emotions surface and dissolve when you do not cling to them. You begin to see yourself more clearly, not as the mask you once presented to the world, but as the awareness behind it all. This clarity changes everything. Instead of chasing approval, you find yourself grounded in your own truth. Instead of running from discomfort, you begin to face it with curiosity. You see that solitude is not a void, but a mirror, showing you the parts of yourself you once ignored. And as you come to accept these parts, the weight of pretending begins to fall away. You no longer feel the need to constantly explain yourself, to prove your worth, to live up to expectations that were never truly your own. The freedom that arises is quiet but powerful, like a flame that burns steadily within. Others may still misunderstand. They may still call you distant, cold, or aloof. But within you, something has shifted permanently. You are no longer chained to the illusions that once dictated your choices. You begin to see that walking alone is not a burden. It is a path. It is the natural outcome of seeking truth in a world that thrives on appearances. And though the path may feel narrow, it is alive with authenticity. And in that authenticity, you find a kind of companionship deeper than any superficial bond. You find the company of your own soul, and from that place, the need for constant approval fades into silence. There comes a point on this path where the separation between yourself and others grows more noticeable, not just in feeling, but in daily life. The invitations you once accepted no longer appeal to you. The conversations that used to flow now seem to stall, and the laughter you once shared feels forced when you try to return to it. People around you may not understand what has shifted, but they sense the difference, and often they respond with confusion, concern, or even subtle resistance. Some will ask why you have changed, why you no longer act the same, why you no longer care for the things you used to. Others will quietly pull away, not out of malice, but because the resonance that once connected you has faded. This is when the chosen one begins to lose old connections. Not through conflict, but through natural misalignment. The more aware you become, the harder it is to hold on to relationships built on shallow foundations. If a friendship was based on gossip, it will dissolve once you stop participating in gossip. If a bond was built on shared complaints, it will weaken when you stop feeding into negativity. If a connection relied on mutual distraction, it will fade once you choose presence over avoidance. This unraveling can feel painful because the human heart still longs for closeness, and letting go of familiar faces can feel like losing parts of yourself. Yet deep down, you know these connections were never truly solid. They were threads woven by circumstance and habit, not by authenticity. As they fall away, space opens up, space that feels empty at first, but is necessary for something deeper to grow. This period of letting go is often the most misunderstood. To others, it may appear as though you are rejecting them, withdrawing without reason, or becoming antisocial. Some may accuse you of thinking you are better than them, not realizing that your journey is not about superiority at all. It is about alignment. You are no longer willing to betray your own awareness just to fit into a crowd. You cannot force yourself to laugh at jokes that feel hollow, to chase goals that feel empty, or to entertain illusions you have already seen through. And because you cannot go backward, the only way forward is through solitude. In this solitude, however, you begin to recognize something profound. You have not truly lost connection. You have simply outgrown certain forms of it. What fades are the bonds that cannot withstand truth. What remains, or eventually appears, are connections that are rare but real. You start to see that true connection is not about constant communication or shared distractions, but about resonance at a deeper level. When you encounter someone who values authenticity as much as you do, the bond is instant and effortless. There is no need to perform, no need to pretend, no need to defend. These connections may be few, but they carry more weight than dozens of shallow ones ever could. During this phase, you also discover that solitude itself becomes a teacher. It reveals the difference between needing others to fill your emptiness and choosing others because you want to share your fullness. When you relied on external validation, connections were about reassurance. Now, as you grow more grounded in your own awareness, connections become about sharing presence, about walking alongside someone without losing yourself. The chosen one realizes that relationships are not about clinging, but about flowing, not about ownership, but about freedom. Of course, not everyone around you will see this. Some may resist your shift, trying to pull you back into the patterns you've left behind. They may remind you of old habits, pressure you to conform, or criticize your solitude. This is part of the test, for walking alone requires strength. You must learn to withstand misunderstanding, to carry the weight of others' projections without letting them define you. But in doing so, you become stronger, more centered, more free. You learn to honor your path, even when it means disappointing others. Over time, you come to see the fading of old connections not as a loss, but as a clearing. It is the natural pruning that makes space for truth. And though the path may still feel lonely at times, there is a quiet knowing within you that this solitude is preparing you for something greater, a life built not on illusion, but on authenticity. Walking alone may separate you from the crowd, but it aligns you with yourself. And in that alignment, you find the beginnings of true freedom. As solitude deepens, it begins to reshape the way you see both yourself and the world. What once felt like an absence now reveals itself as a presence, an energy that grows stronger the more you allow it to fill your life. You start to realize that being alone is not a punishment, but a purification. It strips away the noise, the false expectations, the endless distractions, and leaves you face to face with your own essence. For many, this is the most difficult stage, because silence has a way of showing you everything you once avoided. The emotions you buried, the fears you ignored, the doubts you tried to cover with activity, all of it surfaces. At first, this can feel overwhelming, like standing in a storm with no shelter. But the longer you remain with it, the more you see that the storm is not here to destroy you. It is here to cleanse you. The chosen one learns that solitude is not emptiness, but spaciousness. It is the ground upon which the mind finally settles, the place where thought no longer rushes from one distraction to the next. In that stillness, clarity begins to shine through. You start to understand patterns in your life that once seemed confusing. You see how much of your suffering was created by clinging to illusions, by trying to be someone you were not, by resisting what life was showing you. Solitude strips away those illusions piece by piece until what remains is raw but real. This reality may not always be comfortable, but it is alive with truth. As you grow more comfortable with your own company, you begin to notice a shift in how you relate to others. You no longer approach relationships from a place of need. You do not cling to people in order to feel validated, nor do you shrink yourself to be accepted. Instead, you begin to relate from a place of fullness. Solitude has taught you that your worth is not dependent on external approval. It has shown you that you are whole, even without constant affirmation. And so, when you do connect with someone, it is not because you fear being alone. It is because you genuinely wish to share presence. This shift creates relationships that are lighter, freer, and more authentic. In solitude, creativity also awakens. Without the constant noise of the world, the mind begins to open to new possibilities. Insights arrive unexpectedly, like sparks in the dark. You may find yourself drawn to art, writing, meditation, or simply moments of reflection that bring clarity you never knew you were capable of. This creativity is not forced. It flows naturally from the space you have allowed. The chosen one realizes that solitude is not barren, but fertile, a ground from which deeper understanding and new expressions of life emerge. And yet, with all these gifts, solitude continues to be misunderstood by those who have not walked this path. People may see your preference for quiet as loneliness, your independence as detachment, your stillness as inactivity. But you know that these judgments come from the perspective of those who cannot yet see the richness within silence. Their fear of being alone makes them assume solitude is a weakness, when in truth it is a strength. To face yourself without distraction, to stand in silence without running, to accept your own presence fully. This is not weakness. This is power. In time, solitude stops feeling like something you endure and starts feeling like something you cherish. It becomes a sanctuary, a place where you return to realign with yourself. Even when you are surrounded by people, this inner solitude remains with you, like a hidden well from which you can always drink. The chosen one understands that this is not about withdrawing from the world permanently. It is about carrying the clarity of solitude into every part of life, allowing it to guide choices, shape relationships, and anchor you in truth. Walking alone no longer feels like a burden. It feels like freedom. You see that solitude has not separated you from life, but has brought you closer to it, revealing its depths in ways the noise of the crowd never could. In the quiet, you discover that you are not truly alone at all. You are connected to something far greater, an undercurrent of existence that has always been there, waiting for you to notice. This is the gift of solitude, the realization that what you once feared as emptiness is, in fact, the doorway to fullness. The further you walk along this path, the more you notice how the old layers of your life continue to fall away. What once seemed permanent now feels temporary. What once felt necessary now seems optional. Friendships that thrived on superficial habits naturally dissolve. Ambitions that were born from comparison lose their power, and even identities you once clung to begin to fade. This shedding is not always comfortable, for the human heart becomes attached even to things that no longer serve it. You may feel moments of grief, as if parts of yourself are dying. But slowly, you begin to understand that this process is not death in the true sense. It is transformation. You are not losing yourself, you are uncovering yourself. When the chosen one lets go of old connections, it is not because of arrogance or rejection. It is because resonance has changed. Imagine two instruments once tuned to the same note, vibrating together with ease. Over time, one changes its tuning, while the other remains fixed. The harmony that once existed disappears, not because either instrument is wrong, but because they no longer vibrate at the same frequency. This is what happens when you awaken. Your frequency shifts, and naturally, those who are still tuned to the old notes cannot harmonize with you in the same way. This is why many people drift away without conflict, why conversations that once flowed now feel strained, why gatherings that once felt lively now feel empty. The resonance is gone, and without it the bond weakens. In these moments, the temptation is strong to return to what is familiar. Loneliness may whisper that you should go back, that you should rejoin the old patterns, just to feel included. But something inside you knows that this would be a betrayal. To pretend again, to wear masks again, to silence the truth you've discovered, this would be a return to sleep. And once you have awakened, it is impossible to fall fully back into the dream. You may try, but the illusion will never feel real again. This is why the chosen one must continue forward, even when the road feels empty. As the old connections fade, a different kind of connection begins to appear. These are rare, often unexpected encounters with people who carry the same hunger for authenticity. They may not come often, but when they do, the bond feels immediate, effortless, and profound. With such people, there is no need to explain yourself. No need to justify your solitude, no need to hide your inner world. The resonance is natural, as if two flames recognize each other in the dark. These connections may not always last a lifetime, but their impact runs deep, reminding you that you are not truly alone on this path. Others walk it too, even if they are few. This stage also brings with it a new definition of what it means to connect. You begin to see that true connection has nothing to do with constant contact, shared entertainment, or surface-level similarity. It has everything to do with depth, honesty, and presence. A single conversation rooted in truth can feel more nourishing than years of casual companionship. A moment of silence shared with someone who understands can feel more profound than hours of chatter. The chosen one no longer measures connection by quantity, but by quality. At the same time, you realize that the greatest connection is the one you have with yourself. Solitude has taught you to sit with your thoughts, to face your shadows, to embrace your essence without judgment. And in doing so, you have built a relationship with yourself that cannot be broken. You no longer look outward in desperation for validation because you have found it within. This self-connection becomes the foundation upon which all other relationships are built. If someone enters your life, it is not to fill a void, but to share the fullness you already carry. Even as you honor these new connections, you carry no bitterness for the ones that have fallen away. You understand now that everything has its season, and not everyone is meant to walk the entire journey with you. Some were there to teach lessons, some to mirror parts of yourself, some to accompany you for a time before the paths diverged. To release them is not to reject them, but to honor the truth that your journeys no longer align. This perspective softens the grief and replaces it with gratitude. You can look back with peace, knowing that nothing was wasted. Walking alone does not mean walking without love. It means walking with a love so deep and authentic that it refuses to compromise truth for comfort. It means being willing to let go when resonance is gone, while keeping your heart open for the rare and precious connections that align with your soul. And as you learn this balance, the solitude that once felt heavy transforms into strength. A strength that carries you forward with clarity and quiet confidence. With time, solitude becomes less of a state you endure and more of a way of being that shapes every corner of your life. You begin to see that the true essence of connection is not about how many people surround you, but about the depth of presence you carry into each moment. The chosen one realizes that solitude has refined their perception, allowing them to see through the surface of things and recognize the truth beneath. This new way of seeing changes the way you interact with the world. You no longer feel the urge to please or to prove, because you understand that authenticity is its own validation. The approval of others becomes secondary to the alignment of your own heart. This shift makes relationships rare but precious. Instead of chasing company for the sake of distraction, you allow connections to unfold naturally. You begin to notice that the people who remain in your life, or the ones who appear unexpectedly, share a quality of depth that mirrors your own. With them, silence is not uncomfortable but nourishing, and conversations are not about filling time, but about revealing truth. These bonds are lighter in form yet heavier in meaning, free from expectation yet filled with resonance. You no longer feel compelled to hold on tightly, because you understand that real connection does not need to be forced. It flows naturally, like rivers meeting in a valley. Through this process, your definition of love also transforms. Love is no longer about attachment, ownership, or dependency. It becomes something more expansive, less tied to individual forms, and more rooted in the very fabric of existence. You begin to see love not only in human relationships, but in the simple presence of life itself. The quiet beauty of a tree, the stillness of the sky, the rhythm of your own breath. This recognition deepens the sense that you are never truly alone, because life itself is a constant companion. Solitude opens your heart not just to yourself, but to the whole of existence, and in that opening, love takes on a new meaning, love as awareness, love as acceptance, love as truth. This redefinition of connection also brings freedom. You no longer cling to relationships out of fear, nor do you resist endings out of pain. Instead, you begin to honor the natural flow of life. The coming and going, the meeting and parting, the beginning and ending of chapters. You understand that everything serves its purpose, that every person who crosses your path leaves behind a trace of meaning, even if only for a moment. This perspective frees you from bitterness and resentment, allowing you to bless what has been and release what no longer aligns. The chosen one walks alone, but with an open heart that carries no walls, no chains, no grudges. In this stage, solitude becomes a sanctuary that follows you everywhere. Even in a crowd, you can access the stillness within. Even amid noise, you can hear the quiet voice of truth. This inner solitude gives you strength when the world demands conformity, clarity when the world tries to confuse you, and peace when the world tries to provoke fear. It becomes your anchor, the steady ground beneath your feet. From this place, you can step into the world without being swept away by it. Of course, there will still be challenges. The path of authenticity is not free from trials. There will be moments when you question yourself, moments when the weight of misunderstanding feels heavy, moments when the silence seems endless. But each challenge becomes part of the refining process, shaping your awareness like fire shapes gold. Every trial deepens your trust in the path, reminding you that solitude is not abandonment, but alignment. And so, the chosen one continues, walking with quiet strength. The road may be narrow, but it is alive with truth. The silence may be deep, but it is filled with meaning. In solitude, you discover that the greatest connection is not to another person, not even to a group or an identity, but to the essence of life itself. And when you live from that essence, every step, whether shared or alone, becomes a step in harmony with the whole. There comes a moment on the path when the chosen one realizes that the journey has never truly been about walking away from others, but about walking toward the deepest truth of existence. The solitude that once felt like exile is now revealed as initiation. It was never punishment but preparation, shaping you into someone who can hold clarity in a world clouded by illusions. You see now that aloneness is not the absence of belonging, but the doorway to a greater belonging, one that connects you to the vast and timeless current of life itself. In silence, you begin to hear the language of the universe, the way the wind speaks through the trees, the way water reflects the sky, the way your own breath carries the rhythm of eternity. What once felt empty now feels alive with presence. At this point, the chosen one discovers that walking alone does not mean walking without purpose. Solitude has stripped away the false identities and expectations, revealing a core of authenticity that cannot be shaken. From this core arises a sense of direction, not given by society or imposed by others, but flowing naturally from the depths of your being. This is why those who have walked alone often emerge as guides, teachers, or visionaries, not because they sought to lead, but because their very presence becomes a reminder of what it means to live in truth. Their silence speaks louder than words, their stillness carries more power than noise, and their authenticity ignites something in those who are ready to awaken. But even as this transformation unfolds, the paradox remains. To live authentically is to remain apart from the crowd. It is not about rejecting others or elevating oneself, but about understanding that truth is rarely found where the majority gathers. The chosen one accepts this paradox with grace, walking among people without losing themselves to the collective illusions. They participate in the world while remaining anchored in something deeper. This balance allows them to serve without being consumed, to love without clinging, to live without fear. The final realization is both liberating and humbling. There is no ultimate destination, no final identity to arrive at. The self is not a fixed thing to be discovered once and for all, but an ever-unfolding mystery. Each layer of illusion that falls away reveals another layer of depth. Each encounter with the shadow reveals another hidden strength. Each step into solitude opens another doorway into connection. The journey does not end because truth is infinite and the self is vast beyond comprehension. To find yourself is to discover that there is always more to uncover, always more to become, always more to remember. And yet, this endlessness does not bring despair. It brings peace, for you no longer cling to the need for certainty, no longer grasp for final answers. Instead, you embrace the unfolding itself as the essence of life. You begin to walk not with urgency, but with presence, knowing that every moment carries its own completeness. The chosen one learns to rest in the mystery, to trust the silence, to honor the unknown as the very ground of being. In this state, walking alone is no longer a burden. It becomes a gift. You carry within you a light that does not depend on external validation, a truth that does not need to be defended, a peace that cannot be shaken by the chaos of the world. And though the path may appear solitary from the outside, inwardly it is rich with connection to yourself, to life, to the timeless flow of consciousness that moves through all things. This is why a chosen one must walk alone, not because they are cut off, but because only in solitude can they remember the fullness of who they are. Only in solitude can they shed the masks and illusions that obscure the truth. And only in solitude can they discover that they were never truly alone to begin with. For in the stillness of the heart, the whole universe walks beside them.